All right, welcome into the Bite Meat podcast, and excited for this one, man. Well, I've been excited for all of them. This podcast has been blowing and going from its inception, which is always good. Brought to you, of course, by Texas Star Grill Shop, Rick Martin, Corey Martin, Michelle, the whole gang out there. You hear Gus. You'll hear Gus today later with our smoking hot tip of the week. I am John Lopez, and joining me today on the Bite Meat podcast is Doug Scheiding. And Doug has quite the story. I mean, quite the story in terms of how it got here. Doug, it comes from all walks. You either have it in you or you don't. I'm a sicko when it comes to fishing and barbecue. Sometimes, as much as I hate to admit it, my day job is talking sports 4 hours a day. Everything from Texans and Astros and college football and college basketball. But I always tell people, those are kind of my two favorite hours of the week is when I get to talk about fishing and barbecue. But we'll just keep that among us and the thousands of people that are listening. But yeah. So
well, I'm with you on the barbecue side, but not the fishing side.
Not the fishing side.
I'll let you catch it and I'll cook it.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Hey, maybe we'll get into that. So last week we had the great Grant Pinkerton join us, and his story is so unlike yours. To me, it kind of illustrates, like I said at the top here, it's either in you and you have the passion, or you don't. I mean, he came up from like literally not knowing a dang thing, sleeping on his parents' couch, and decided, he had his degree from Texas, and was ready to maybe enter the workforce, and all of a sudden decided, I got to do this. Did the whole pop-up trailer thing, and next thing you know, he's got restaurants here and San Antonio and a world champion, etc. So I kind of want to start right there, because I don't want to talk about your background too late in this podcast, because I know people who listen to this are going to be going, really, that dude? So I'll let you I'll let you lay it out, how you got from where you were to where you are now. How did that happen? And tell us about it.
Well, I went to high school in New Mexico. I played tennis. So okay. I only mentioned that because I like competition. Mm-hmm. So and that was kind of one-on-one, mano-a-mano, et cetera. So, I like to be the best at whatever I do. So I was actually co-valedictorian of my high school class. Went to A&M. I see you've got the ATM there on the wall as well. So, and went into aerospace engineering. My dad was in the Air Force, loved planes. Wanted to go into some type of engineering, and so I went into aerospace engineering. And so didn't make the A&M team, but that turned out to be okay. Went through 4 years of aerospace engineering, joined a fraternity, the saying, rent a friend, join a frat, at A&M. So I was actually a founding member. I did that actually because I didn't hang out with the engineering dweebs, and I wanted some socialization skills. So
what frat? We got to give him a shout out.
Phi Delta Theta. I was bond number 30 of Phi Delta Theta. Thank you for that. So, in college, I wound up graduating number one in my classes again, and was the number one aerospace engineering student in the nation that year, and had my pick of jobs. I interviewed all over, and decided that I wanted to work at a small engineering company of 3 people, because I wanted to do real work. I wanted to do it right away, and that kind of sets the stage from the standpoint of I like to do things on my own, and don't want to a lot of other people telling me what to do. So did that for about 20 years. And now I'm a business broker and equipment appraiser. And this barbecue thing has kind of taken a life of its own. So played tennis for many years, and then blew out my knee. And then a neighbor asked me to do a barbecue competition, a charity event. And he and I practiced for a while, a couple months or so. And then we wound up getting 3rd overall out of 53 teams, beat all 3 barbecue teams. And then we started cooking together. So, but I've been cooking on my own since 2013.
So relatively new. I mean, I'm one of those guys that just grew up at the foot of his father who liked to cook. And then I got the bug, but in terms of competitiveness, relatively new. Like aerospace engineer, your background, a lot of people are like, well, how did that happen? Just one of those things, an escape. How did it happen?
Oh, to get out of aerospace engineering?
Yeah.
Yeah, a guy that I had worked for me. I actually managed an office in Houston in the Park
Hmm.
10 area. So I had a
Okay.
Houston office, had a San Antonio office, et cetera. So my sales guy for software sales in Houston actually called on me and he said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. It's a business brokerage, basically the representation of small business owners and
Hmm.
confidential sales of their business." And so I was kind of at a place where I wasn't really happy. I was a sales
Yeah.
manager of a software tool that sold worldwide, and they were going to double my marketing budget, and said my sales budget was going to be double as well. And I was trying to get in, approved by the FDA, and I said, "Oh, that's not." So we started that about 17 years ago, and so
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing. I get bored with things, and I
Yeah.
want to move on to the next thing.
And it's the competitiveness, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's where you got it. How did that part start behind a pit?
Well, in terms of my my nickname used to be Microwave Boy. If it I'd be perfectly content with a salad and nachos and
Yeah.
maybe some soup. But if it took longer to make than eat, my philosophy was it wasn't worth the time. And now I've gone all the way the other way, right? The pendulum is swung.
To say the
And
least.
yeah, and once we did that first contest and then we got a little bit of success, we just wanted more, and we started competing. And so I used to do 10 to 15 competitions a year when we cooked together. And so actually we bought a pit from Gator Pit Richie.
Hmm.
They're in Houston, a custom pit from him, and we cooked on that for about 3 years. So I started off with barrels actually, and then I used to make barrels, 55-gallon drums, the vertical type,
Yeah.
and just with parts from Home Depot. And I'd make
Yeah.
them for friends, and I'd customize them, and
Yeah.
did a few A&M ones. But and then when basically he kicked me off the team, I did real well at the San Antonio Rodeo by
Yeah.
myself when he was out of town. But his wife and my wife and me, I did 3 the team way, I did 1 my way,
Hmm.
and it was the same recipe that I'd used a couple of years earlier and got 4th at the San Antonio Rodeo in brisket. San Antonio is actually larger than Houston in terms of number of teams. It's like 330 teams or
Hmm.
so, but he didn't like that. And we had a team meeting, and he pointed at me, when you made the rogue decision to
Oh,
cook your
hey
own
now.
recipe. Yes,
Yeah.
we were. Yeah, it's when you decided you were no longer part of this team. Well, the
Mhm.
conversation, went south from there. But so when we were leaving, and you always marry up. So I was
Yeah.
like, "Hey, what should my name be?" And she goes, "Oh, it should be Rogue Cookers. He gave you the name." And
Yeah.
because I was going to be White Trash Cookers and cook on barrels. And but anyway, so that's what I started. I did barrels for a few. Had a bad experience where the wind blew and my food tasted like charcoal at a
Mhm.
contest. And I'm like, I'm not going to blow $800,000. And then I went to a mall, saw a Traeger, and I said, okay, because I have a trailer that's built
Yeah.
out of the kitchen. And so I need something to kind of transport my grill up and down, whether it was an offset or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I've done an offset in there a few times, but and then that's when I bought my first Traeger. First contest, 150 teams. Western Wood was the sponsor, and got I think it was 16th in ribs and 14th in brisket or something like that, cooking everything on a Traeger pellet grill. And I'm
How
like,
about
I
that?
can do this. And I think I
Yeah.
was the first one in Texas that started, basically cooking exclusively
Yeah.
everything on a pellet grill.
Yeah.
And
That we're gonna get into that because I
yeah,
was
yeah, okay, all right. I
I
don't want
was
to
hard
bury the
headed.
lead. Don't let
Yeah,
it
yeah.
bury the lead.
No, 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 no. I'm glad that's called the tease in the business, baby. That's called the tease.
There you go. There you go.
And so, yeah, I was one of those too, man. I had my offset, I had my grill, and kind of turned my nose up at the Traeger, like a lot of people do, like some people still do.
Yep.
And then I got a Traeger. I got the Timberline, and
Oh, which one
yeah,
did you
yeah.
you have? Which
Now there's the 1300, I think is what that
the
is.
Timberline 1300?
Yeah,
Yes. That's a big
and
boy.
that's a big boy. Well, we got a big family. I'm always cooking. I did my first whole hog on it, and it was
Fantastic.
outstanding at Christmas
Fantastic.
time.
Love to hear it.
Absolutely outstanding. So I've been cooking on it now for probably pushing 3 years, and we're going to pop around on some of the topics I sent you. Let's start there because You don't have to tell me twice, buddy. I mean, you can do anything on that, good or better. Now, if I have a whole weekend, a whole Saturday, I like the process of the wood and all that. I like doing different things, with the wood, but that's just more hobby than anything. But if you want to cook, you can cook with the Traeger. What is it about that maybe, I don't know, bothers you is the right thing, but maybe some misconceptions about the Traeger and what a lot of people think about the pellet grills?
Yeah, let's just talk pellet grills in general. So, when
Yeah.
I first started cooking on them, my nickname was the one nut cooker. And they would, because I gave up part of my manhood, when I went to the
Of course.
Traegers, and they would
Yeah.
protest me almost
Mm.
every contest. And I'm like, it's
Really?
in the rules. Yes. Yes. And I'm like, this is
Wow.
what, 2013, 2014. And I'm like, it's in the rules. You can have electricity just as long as it's not maintaining the fire.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, do you want to give up all electricity, the rotisseries, the barbecue gurus,
Yeah.
anything, so IBCA even had a vote on it. IBCA, the International Barbecue, Cookers
Mhm.
Association, they had a vote on it, and luckily it did pass. And people, I actually would tell people, number one, I've got a quote on my website that says, barbecue is not a fire management contest; it's a barbecue contest. So who
Yes.
cooks the best barbecue? So if I come to an event, I actually think with a pellet cooker, you're at a little bit of a disadvantage. Just like with any grill, you need to learn the grill and adapt your cooking methods to it. Whether you
Mhm.
do hot and fast. Pellet grills are low and slow. It's such a fine, blue smoke. It has a really good fire,
Mhm.
and it's an accent. If
Yeah.
I'm going to a contest and they like a lot of heavy smoke and mesquite smoke and stuff like that,
Mhm.
it's probably not going to be my day.
Yeah.
But the pellet grills it's allowed me to work on recipes. It's freed me up. It's my creative side has come out. And
Mhm.
so I would just tell people I'm at a disadvantage. So if you can't beat me on a pellet grill, you need to up your game. so so I just don't know what people are afraid of in terms of and
Yeah.
actually at the Houston Rodeo, they tried to ban me 1 year as well. I say
Dang.
ban pellet cookers.
Yeah.
They were actually banned for an hour and a half at the Houston Rodeo. It was after I had won it,
Yeah.
and they told all the brand ambassadors that pellet cookers were not allowed. And then so I actually knew some of the people, and I went and talked to the vice president and president, and it was a personal thing for one of them. And he said,
Mhm.
when you put a brisket on, it's a personal thing. You need to stay up with it all night. And I said, I never did with my barrels. And
Yeah.
so, but pellet cookers, I think they have a place, whether you're a beginning cook or an experienced cook. But
Mhm.
is it like the Cadillac of offset cookers? It's a Jambo. I think y'all said Jumbo or something. It's a
Yeah.
Jambo. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and that's a fantastic. That's Jamie Greer, who's won the
Yeah.
Houston Rodeo as well. That's one of the best
Mhm.
$20,000 cookers that you can
Mhm.
buy. But the pellet grill has its place, from the beginning cook to the experienced cook. I just being a recovering engineer, I'm very detail oriented, and so I like to, every time I cook, it's a competition.
Yeah.
Every I say barbecue's like golf. You need to worry about yourself and not what everybody else,
Exactly.
who else is
Totally
there.
agree. Totally
So
agree.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it's how you cook that day. So,
Yeah.
when I first started, it's like, oh, look who's here, look who's here. I
Yeah.
don't care now. I don't
Yeah.
care now. So yeah, I go out and most of the people are my friends, and so I'll go up and say hi to him, and I wish him well. But
Yeah.
it's every man, woman for himself, and you're out there cooking and trying to do the best you can.
Well, I see a couple of Houston Livestock Show and rodeo trophies behind you. I see
There you
another
go.
trophy
There you go.
behind you. So scoreboard, as people like to say, scoreboard. Give us the rundown of what you've won, because I do want to get back into the pellet grill thing. I think this is a very fascinating and informative point you're making. I want to follow up on some stuff, but what you've won here, I know the here in Houston, it's been very good to you.
Yes, it has. So
Mhm.
yeah, I actually got the invitation to cook there when I got kicked off the team and got fourth overall. I got second in brisket that year after getting fourth a couple years, and got 16th in chicken and got fourth overall at the San Antonio Rodeo. If I gotten first, I would have gotten reserve. But anyway, the person from Houston was there, and he actually asked me to cook, and so I cooked the first year and got 18th in brisket. And then he goes, "You've got one more year." Yeah, I was on probation. And then that's when I won in 2015.
Yeah.
Actually, I was cooking with Across the Track
Yeah.
cookers. So I won on a little Tex. I still have that grill. It's 14 years old and still runs, and I love that grill. But I
Yeah.
won with chicken,
Oh, yeah.
and that's when Houston Rodeo competed each chicken versus ribs versus brisket. Each one competed against the. Now it's a
Yeah.
combined score.
Yeah.
The last 3-4 years, but and I happened to beat who I think is one of the greatest, is one of the goats of competition barbecue, which is Darren Worth. And
Hmm.
I beat him like by 0.67 or something like that. But and then I actually finaled the next year in ribs, and then cooking with switched over and started cooking with Wild Game Crew, because
Hmm.
I know Tom Purtle from like 30 years ago, and I
Yeah.
heard him. He came in Champions Row, and I heard him, and anyway, I went up and started talking to him, and so I went over and cooked with him. And Paul Shoddy, actually the VP of Head Country, used to cook with them, and I'm a
Okay.
head country ambassador, so have been used Head Country since day one. So Paul and I finaled in ribs as well, so I'm a 3-time finalist. I've actually gotten a first at the Jack Daniels in Chef's
Okay.
Choice,
Uh-huh.
cooking steak and Hasselback potatoes, and I got first cooking with helping Danielle Divacu, and we got first
Oh,
in a
yeah, I know
fight
her very well.
at the American Royal. So I have 3 first places at the World Championships.
That's unbelievable. Back on this before we get into some tips for our listeners, because as I always say, and I say at the top of the show and at the end of the show, I like to make this podcast something that every level of cook, barbecue, pitmaster, whatever you want to call them, can learn from. But I do want to get to that. But first, on the pellet grills,
Yes.
um, one thing that has always, ever since I've gotten on them, always kind of fascinated me is the industry should love pellet grills, even if they individually don't ever cook on them. And the reason is it gets more people into cooking, into doing it. And then the bug starts because a lot of people, frankly, we all have lives, man. I mean, we
Yes.
all have lives,
Exactly.
and as I said earlier, like if I have a Saturday, I like the process. I'll go out there and mess with the sticks and the charcoal and all that because to me it's fun. But if I'm cooking like I did for Christmas at whole hog and a couple of briskets, man, I slept like a baby. It was comfortable. It was easy. So I don't understand why there is this stigma, or I shouldn't say that because more and more people are into it. But there has been this stigma of pellet grills or whatever. When it gets the industry, it's growing the industry. It's getting more people interested. I mean, that's not wrong, is it?
No, no, no. Yeah,
Yeah.
it took off for a while, but it seems to have lost a little bit of steam. But
Hmm.
exactly, and one of the things I like to do is to be an evangelist from the standpoint of I like to go out and teach, like that event at Texas Star that I did
Hmm.
last Friday, and I'm an instructor for Traeger. Traeger used to have a trailer that would go around and around the U.S. and some in Canada actually, and
Hmm.
then I'd go fly in and I do two days of courses and things. So yeah, it's been surprising, but a lot of people, they still like their gas grill. I mean, gas grills still, I haven't
Yeah.
used mine in 3 years, and but that's a different story.
Let me ask you this though. One of the big arguments against the pellet grills is the bark, and I frankly have never had an issue with it. If you do it the right way, you can get the most beautiful bark. You've got the hardware to prove it. What is it about that again that people will say? Well, I like to get this big, beautiful, juicy, big bark on my briskets, and you just can't do it with pellet grills. Sure, you can, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that happens with not only brisket, and
Mm-hmm.
brisket may be the worst offender, and maybe steak second after that, people under season their meat. And when you have a lot of rub on that brisket or steak, you're gonna, especially brisket, you're gonna have a good. I think it helps develop a good bark.
Yes.
And we're we all kind of use the Texas crutch, whether you use the religious question of foil or butcher paper. And
Mm-hmm.
we may there's a disagreement with some of your previous podcasts and stuff because I'm a foil
Yeah.
guy.
Oh,
And
okay.
so not only do I cook on pellet grills, I use foil, which,
Yeah.
will probably disintegrate your degrade your bark to a certain degree, but you can always recover that. I believe you can, once you take it out of the foil, you can still put it back on the pit. I would rest it for a while, and then
Yeah.
you can still put it back in the pit, and reheat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things in competition barbecue, and I own you know uh the web domain, just I'll do it. It's blasphemous to me that we put a mixture of kind of some barbecue sauce on it, and then you put it back on the pit, and it actually, that sugar kind of actually
Mm-hmm.
helps create a bark and stuff too. But that's kind of like the unknown secrets in competition, from the standpoint of, just like in Central Texas barbecue, some garlic salt or Lowry seasoning salt might
Yes.
fall in those briskets as well, in addition to salt and pepper and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah, so and that'll help with the bark though.
yeah.
That will actually help with the bark.
Absolutely. That's just fantastic. Now you're a rebel, basically, is what we're establishing today with the pellet grills and the foil. And tell me about injection. Let's go ahead and go all in. Inject or no inject?
When I'm at home, I actually don't inject often.
Mm-hmm.
If But in competition, I do. I think,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's about the details. And one of the details is just any little extra that you can do for water retention and the moistness of when they take a bite of that, because with IBCA it used to be the suicide kind of, and even Lone Star, it's the suicide round of judging. So you have a table, you take the top
Mm-hmm.
half or top 10 off that table because you have 20, and then it just goes down. So your brisket had to taste good at 30 minutes and 2 hours.
Every step. Yeah. Every step of the way.
Exactly. So if you can get just a little bit extra,
Mm-hmm.
water retention, basically you've got phosphates and some, soy and other
Mm-hmm.
flavor enhancers, et cetera. But you can overdo it. So I
Yeah.
always, whatever it is, I'll use, like, butcher's prime, injection, and I do it at half strength. I don't
Okay.
do it, because I don't want to totally overpower the meat. But
Exactly.
yeah, but in competition, I still do inject, and most people do. And
Yeah.
some people inject their ribs, and I inject my
Oh, yeah.
chicken too. So
Yeah.
I don't inject my ribs anymore, but I do inject my chicken.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some of these other things that I wanted to talk about, just kind of getting people thinking, getting people, help our listeners.
Let's do
One
that.
of the things I sent to you was the little things. You've touched on a couple here in terms of competition, but let's talk about, people who, like me, who are just absolute sickos when it comes to it, and you want to make everything. What are some of the little things that you do? Let's say backyard, that just make a huge difference and is gonna kind of change the way your barbecue taste, no matter what piece of meat we're talking about.
Okay, I have what I call, and maybe it's a cover, but I have OCD tendencies. There are certain
Yeah,
things that really bother me.
you and me
So
both, brother.
yeah, okay, all right. So we're amongst friends here. So brisket. One of the things on brisket. Well, let me give you a couple things on brisket. So,
Hmm.
um, on the edges, on the top edges, after you trim your brisket, et
Hmm.
cetera. And, I trim a lot of fat off. I'll take a 18-pound and trim it down to about 14-pound. I'm not the kind that separates. I don't do that. And
Yeah.
then I also don't, trim it down to like a meatloaf, but whatever you do, the edge around, especially around the flat, I
Hmm.
bevel it with a pair of shears, because that edge kind of has a point to it. And when
Hmm.
you cut, and especially on the top, and I'm a fat side down guy, a religious question again, because I want that bark and I want it to be pretty. And if you've got the bark on the bottom, and there was someone on your show that said, "Oh yeah, fat side up and the tallow," and
and I'm a fat side down guy.
Okay, I'm a fat side down too.
Yeah.
But the best brisket I've ever had is from Burnt Bean in Seguin, and Ernest Cervantes, who's a former competition guy, and he does fat side up. I mean, that's the best brisket. But anyway, so bevel that thing, and then when you're cutting it, I use an electric knife, and I use a brisket slicer to slice my knife, to slice my knife to slice my brisket. But I use an electric knife because you can get nice, clean slices and very even. So don't be afraid. And it's just basically a fillet, electric fillet knife that you're using for your fishing.
Yeah, and it's serrated, which I think works pretty dang well.
It's fantastic.
I think
and it doesn't pull it. It doesn't pull it.
Exactly.
And so I use that actually on my ribs too, because one of the things I hate on ribs is hard bark. So in competition, we put a lot of people put parquet. I actually use I use Butcher's barbecue grilling oil, and I put that on there. And that helps because when you take a bite of ribs, I don't like the bark to pull off with the rib. You want that, whether you like a fall off the bone, which we love in Texas, or if you like the bite through. So that's one of the things. When you under seasoning, we talked about under seasoning. Everybody under seasons their meat. And because just season it and spritz it a little bit, help it sweat a little bit, and then I like, especially with the pellet cooker, I like to put my meat on as cold as possible.
Oh, really? Then that's a new one on me.
As cold as possible. So even sometimes I'll even and when you trim a brisket, you want it as cold as possible, but when you inject, you want it a little warmer. And the whole idea that you're going to put a piece of meat out and it's going to get to room temperature in 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, it's a total fallacy. It's going to take a brisket to get to room temperature. It would take 6, 7, 8 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 hours.
Yeah, you had to take a long time. Even a steak would as well. But so make sure you put a lot on your brisket. This is actually a trick. Only put one rub on the bottom, and because I usually put 2 or 3 on the top, and then I put one on the bottom because I'm actually straining that au jus. That's why one of the reasons I use foil, and is to strain the au jus, and then I'll put it back on the brisket when I serve it. And in competition, I'll actually mix that and create a mixture to put it on the bark as well. So
you're kind of blowing my mind now. Both those things are things that I've never tried. The other stuff, I'm with you 100%. That's good stuff. Explain. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, if you can explain that a little more in terms of why you do the rub on one side, and I mix my rubs. Actually, if I'm being honest, I don't make my own. I just mix rubs that I like for the top and the bottom. What is the science behind what you're talking about?
Meat, brisket meat is 72% water, and that the fat is the oil, right, that comes out. And so I was going to say this earlier, and I'm glad you reminded me. The whole thing about tallow on the top, I think, is total BS. I heard someone say, and I've heard it a lot, that you put the tallow on, you do fat up, and it kind of goes through the meat. All I have to do is say, do oil and water mix? No, they don't. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Yeah. That's all you have to ask. And so tallow is the oil from the fat. And so the meat is water. So it's not going to go through it. It's not going to help. And in butcher paper, you're soaking in the tallow. That's not going to be reabsorbed in the brisket. So I use foil, and you use a fat separator, and you'll get about 50-50 tallow and au jus. And I use that au jus and marinating steaks. I put it back on my brisket. I'll use it in my carne asada. I do all kinds of stuff with that. And save the tallow for your oil, for your green beans or Brussels sprouts or something like that. So that, yeah. So anyway, but and what also I was going to say is when you wrap your brisket, when you wrap your ribs, always use a little moisture. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things is, and I don't mind it, but you probably should put a hot, a medium, lukewarm,
Mm-hmm.
and not put something cold in there. Because actually, what happens is, and I don't really mind, I don't really care,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm cooking on a pellet cooker, and what's another 30 minutes or so. But if I put in
Yeah.
cold apple juice or beef bouillon, or actually I save some brisket juice, and I'll actually put 4 to 6 ounces of brisket juice in competition from
Okay.
a previous brisket that I had in the freezer from the juice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll put that in there, and I'll put it in there cold, so you'll see the actual brisket temperature go down from let's say 165 to 158 or something like that. If you
Yeah.
want, just crank it up. You could warm that juice, or you could just crank it up to 325 for about 10-15 minutes, and then basically turn it back down to 250, 275. So,
This
and
is
what's yeah,
fantastic.
and what's happening is, because I heard one of the Texas Star people say this, is that when you're the last part of the cook, and when you're resting your brisket, etc., it's still rendering the fat, right? And so the juices aren't being reabsorbed into the brisket. It's actually the extra fat that's
Mm-hmm.
rendering, that's still making it extra juicy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Well, that's a great couple more things for you here, because this is really good stuff. One thing that I know you do, two things, but I'm going to start with this one. I talked about testing the boundaries of barbecue norms. You just hit on some that I know you probably learned some from others. But I know some of this was trial and error by you. It had to be. But like, you seem to be a guy? Maybe this is a scientific mind. At work, that you are not averse to testing those boundaries, trial and error. Maybe something you just mentioned is one of the big hits you've had. I'm sure you've had some misses like we've all had,
oh
but
yeah.
that's got to be sort of the fun in it for you, right? What are some of the things that you really feel like people need to understand? It's not just watch a YouTube video and cook a brisket. It's test the boundaries yourself if you want to put your own stamp on it, right?
Absolutely. When I first started, a lot of people weren't there. YouTube wasn't, as popular,
Mm-hmm.
and there weren't a lot of classes and things. I'm on the Barbecue Central show, as you probably, and I was a devout listener to that show. And he
Mm-hmm.
used to have these roundtable, where competition cooks, champions would get around, and they'd talk about how they cooked. I'd listen to them 6, 7, 8 times.
Yeah.
And also, as it relates to that, I I don't like, number one, most cooks say they don't like their competition food that they turn in. I think that in Texas, I think we need to, because it's just the everyday, Bobby Sue or Billy
Mm-hmm.
Joe off the street that's the judge. It doesn't have to be a certified judge. I
Yeah.
wanted I wanted to eat my food, so I
Mm-hmm.
want it to taste good. So that's different than most competition cooks. Secondly, I wanted to bring flavors in from outside the area, because I don't want five that taste the same.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be a little different.
Yeah.
So that's a norm in competition. Those are both norms, bringing new flavors in, and then also liking your food. That I use, and I keep a journal. I
That's
keep a
my next
cooking
question.
journal.
That's my next
Yes.
question. I was going to ask you. My example would be, as you know, I'm a big fisherman, and I have whether it's on my GPS that I keep on my boat, or this little journal right here that I have.
Ah,
I'll mark. Okay, this was the tide. This was the temperature. This was what the all different aspects of the high pressure. What the pressure was it a
nice.
full moon? Was it a new moon? And let's say I nailed the fish on this day. I mark what the moon was, the tides, the winds, all that stuff. And so you have it. You can't remember these things. I go back out on
No,
the water
no,
and I won't remember everything.
no.
Same thing with my cooking. I'm sure not to the degree of you, but I'll write down occasionally a couple of notes. Okay, this worked, this worked. I mean, if you're going to take this seriously, why would you not put it down on paper? Tell us about your journals and how that helps you.
Yeah, I'm not super detailed because, being OCD, you could get way overboard on this,
Yeah.
so I like to keep it, a cook to 2 or 3 lines, and then
Mhm.
I keep it in a Word file, and that way I can easily search it. What happens
Yeah.
is in your cooking journey is you kinda go down different paths, and sometimes things aren't tasting like they used to, and, you thought something was really good, and you kinda went down a wrong road, and you kinda wanna
Mhm.
backtrack to where that fork in the road was, and then go back down a different road. So like I say,
Yeah.
everything is a competition. When I cook 2 steaks, I've always got I tweak one variable at a time.
Yeah.
And in terms of norms and stuff, I've got something out there called the Scheiding method,
Mhm.
and it's for cooking steaks. And we all, the OCD, the little gray line that goes around a steak, and then you've got the red center,
Yeah.
that drives me crazy too.
You take
So,
it off.
yeah, so, well, yeah, no, I don't take it off. So my Scheiding method is this, and tell me if you've heard someone I developed this, I don't know, 5, 6
Mhm.
years ago or so. Um, I'll season a steak, and a great, basic rub is
Mhm.
a Montreal. In fact, when we won the Jack, I take
Mhm.
Montreal, and I learned this from Ernest Cervantes of Burnt Bean,
Mhm.
um, is to grind the Montreal. It's the salt crystals are too big. Just
Yeah.
grind the Montreal, do a medium grind on it, put that on your steak. I use a Worcestershire sauce or Head Country marinade as a
Mhm.
binder, for brisket as well as steak, and then you put that on, and then I put it on a little cookie sheet, and of course I'm doing two, so I've got two
Yeah.
cookie sheets, and put it in the freezer, and
Okay.
I'll put it in the freezer for about 15 minutes if it's an inch and a half. If it's
Mhm.
about an inch, and I'll put it in for about 10 minutes. Number
Okay.
one, I always like it cold. And then
Mhm.
number two, you're cooling the outside of the meat, right? And so it's
Mhm.
cooler than the inside. So then I actually put it on the grill, and sealing in the juices, we all know, is a myth. That doesn't work. You're actually destroying the meat fibers on the top. And so
Mhm.
it actually lets more juice out as you cook it. So I do a smoke on the steak, and then that extra coolness on the outside, I think, helps prevent the gray ring because it's actually starting out at a cooler temperature. And then
Okay.
I'll do a reverse sear, and sear at 350 and below. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that, we've all heard of the Maillard reaction,
Yeah.
which is basically the amino acids and letting off nutty flavors and things like that. That doesn't occur if you sear it above 350. You're actually
Hmm.
just charring it, making it black. So I
Yeah.
sear 325 to 350. So all in all, do it to about 132. So the Scheiding method is freezing the steak, for
Yeah.
a little, and then I'll get a red to red about 75% of the time if I'm cooking it right. Red
Damn.
on the top, red to the bottom, and then do a reverse sear to about 132, and don't let it rest.
Yeah.
I let it rest for as long as hashtag the phone eats first for Instagram, and, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But it actually, if you start slicing into your steak, it'll actually cool down a lot faster. But
Mhm.
I serve it and have people, but cut it right away, because what do you do if you let your steak rest? All the juices are falling
You
out
see them.
anyway on the
Yeah,
plate.
you see them all
It's
over
To
the
me, it's
place.
just common sense. It's just common
Yeah.
sense. So, all right, that's a long
No,
explanation, but
that was
there's
great. This is
a
great, man.
lot of different variations of things
I'm
in my
listening to
steak
you. I'm
process.
listening to you, trying to figure out next time I can get you on. But no, hey, before we let you go,
Yes, sir.
I always do this because you guys are so generous with your time, and I know you're so generous in life with what you do. Do you have any organizations or anything? I know you have 3 new rubs coming out, and that was part of the Texas Star Grill.
Yes.
I was going to say lessons clinic, whatever you want to go.
Yeah,
Instruction.
it was a grilling class. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
class
An
as you do.
instruction
So
class. Yeah.
tell us about that and anything else that you feel you want our listeners to know.
Absolutely. So I've got 3 rubs, and I'm actually a Head Country ambassador, and they got purchased by Old World Spice, which is a co-packer out of Kansas City, and so they're the ones
Mhm.
that create my rubs. So I've got 3. I've got a Texas brisket rub, and that it's actually been inspirational for me, because that was my brisket when I got second and fourth, and my last years ago. And it's, backtracking and going back, and they caused me to go back to my original brisket rub that I used, and so that is the one I used in competition, and I've started using it again in competition. So my last contest I got second, and a guy from Tito's may have had some fall on and got fourth or fifth, but anyway, so I've got a Texas brisket rub. It's fantastic. It's got a little bit of mesquite flavoring in it, and then I've got an all-purpose seasoning, which has it's a little more pepper than most, and I use New Mexico chili powder, so it gives it a back end heat. And then I've got a Doug's Dust, which I designed and I used in the beginning as more of a finishing dust. And so after you cut everything up, and like at that class I did a prime rib roast and cut up into chunks, etc., and then I sprayed that my finishing dust, and it's paprika based. There's others out there that are white, and I think you can see that right away. So that's not something I want in my competition. So I've got those 3 rubs. Texas Star sells all 3 of them, and both online as well as in the stores. And you can actually find my my brisket rub in some Home Depots around Houston as well. So I've got a partnership went and taught classes at Home Depot booth at Memphis in May last year as well as this year, and they liked my brisket enough that they decided to carry the rub in some of the stores. So on socials, you can find me on Rogue Cookers everywhere: Instagram, Facebook. RogueCookers.com is my website. I'm on the Barbecue Central show as the Texas embedded correspondent ever since I won Houston Rodeo.
How about that?
In 2015? Yes, I exactly. I called in on Tuesday after we rode in on the wagon, and he liked my energy, etc. I'm a co-host on the Baseball and Barbecue podcast. They're Mets fans. I'm a Cubs fan. I hate to say it, but and then actually they're in Houston. I'm on the Backyard Bay radio show at it's on 700 9 a.m. sponsored by Texas Star Grills as well.
You got that going too,
and so we pop on at 9:25 ever since COVID, and there's 5 of us of the Wild Game crew: Tom Pirtle, Roger, and Mike Pujol, and myself. So we are 4 of us, and Michael Miller, obviously the host. So those are kind of the things where you can hear me and listen to me.
Man, this has been so much fun, and obviously I know you got more things coming down the pike, so we will stay in touch, and we will absolutely follow all your endeavors. And Rogue Cookers, I mean, you're still going to compete, right?
Oh yeah, no, I do. Yeah, I do about 4 or 5 now classes. Competitions, and then I do more classes, and then I do some events. So I do some events with Traeger as well. So I've done 4 contests so far this year. So definitely still compete. Got to feed the fire of my of my competition. So I greatly appreciate you having me on, especially after Cal McNair and Hannah and and Aaron Franklin and Chef Chris Shepard. I'm like, what, he wants me on? That's fantastic.
Heck yeah. Hey man, really appreciate it. Coming up next, of course, is our weekly smoking hot tip of the week. We're gonna have Gus Johnson joining us this time. So really appreciate it, and we'll get you on again sometime soon.
Sounds good. Say hi to Gus for me.
Will do.